In the heart of Africa lies a country called the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It is a vast place with lush forests, vigorous rivers, and incredible riches such as gold, timber, uranium, cobalt, diamond, etc. These natural resources have inspired a most unnatural history of greed and violence. For over a century, the Congo has been haunted by the memories of its past, while other African countries have come to terms with the history of exploitation and colonization. The Congo continues to relive the unshakable legacy of one man, King Leopold II of Belgium, whose ventures cost the lives of some 10 million. I'm your host Shirvan and welcome to Caspian Report. Sometimes our videos get blocked because they are deemed hazardous. You can bypass such national firewalls by using NordVPN, which has over 5,000 servers worldwide and applies a no logs policy. Just go to nordvpn.com/CaspianReport to get 70% off the 3-year plan and use the code CaspianReport to get an extra month free. For centuries, the Congo River Basin served as a borderline separating the regional African powers of Congo, Luba, Lunda, Anziku, and Misri. These indigenous powerhouses acted as patrons to smaller client states, and they frequently traded slaves, spices, and other goods with Arab merchants and Portuguese explorers. It was a balance of power that was ripe for exploitation. In Europe, the wheels of industry began to turn, and with the Industrial Revolution came a new demand for materials, including rubber, a strategic resource then monopolized in South America. The post-Napoleonic nationalist fervor that swept across Europe and the economic downturn of the 1870s resulted in the abandonment of free trade for protectionism. The great powers of Europe turned to Africa as a means of balancing their trade deficits. At around the same time, developments in medicine overcame the tropical diseases that had previously closed off Central Africa. Armed with new antidotes, weapons, and insatiable hunger, European explorers rushed to claim the interior of the Congo for king and country. King Leopold II of Belgium, a constitutional monarch and a keen entrepreneur, sought to use the Congo's high natural occurrence of rubber to overturn the South American monopoly. In 1876, the Belgian king launched the International African Association, a rubber and ivory export business operating under the disguise of humanitarianism. At the Berlin Conference of 1885, Leopold was awarded the Congo on the condition that the resources be open to international exploitation. The entirety of the Congo, which was 75 times the size of Belgium, became a private possession of the Belgian king and was dubbed the Congo Free State. The territory, however, was anything but free. Leopold's ownership accelerated the process of organizing the trading outposts of the Congo into a corporate state with a private military. Initially formed with officers from the Belgian army, the Force Publique filled its ranks by recruiting African mercenaries as well as by abducting people from nearby villages or by purchasing slaves. The largest provider of slaves was the Sultanate of Zanzibar. Since the arrival of Arab slavers 3 centuries earlier, the Zanzibar Sultanate had expanded its influence throughout the Congo with a series of satellite states. At the time of the scramble for Africa, Zanzibar had established significant commercial interests in the eastern Congo. For the Free State, however, Zanzibar was a threat. It didn't take long for the rivalry to turn violent. In 1892, hostilities broke out between Leopold's mercenaries and the Zanzibari Arab slavers, with the former masking the conflict as a humanitarian endeavor to end the slave trade. 2 years into the fighting, the Congo-Arab War resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of Congolese and the permanent expulsion of Zanzibari influence from the contested area. Having secured its borders, the Free State was organized for maximum profit. Company officials created a central crown territory bordered by many smaller districts, each sold to a foreign private export company, such as the Anglo-Belgian India Rubber Company. To meet the demand of European shareholders, the companies utilized all means available to them, however cruel or inhumane. International buyers such as Dunlop Rubber and Goodyear Tire became indifferent customers of an increasingly ruthless corporate machine. The central government in Boma randomly set rubber quotas for each district, often without taking into account the available workforce or natural yield of the area. Meanwhile, villages were forced to provide workers to the companies as a form of taxation, with a refusal to do so resulting in the village's destruction as well as the mutilation of the residents. Dismembered limbs, bodies, and heads were used as public displays to terrorize the locals into submission. Another routine method to encourage labor was to abduct family members and force the workers to repurchase their loved ones with rubber above the set quotas. In some cases, even where the quotas were met, workers would find that their families had been murdered regardless, while those more fortunate were shipped to Belgium to populate one of Leopold's human zoos. To minimize expenses, proper equipment was scarcely provided. Instead, at the pain of the whip, the Congolese were often made to harvest rubber with their skin. Those who refused to comply would be subject to, or were to have their families subject to, beatings, torture, rape, or execution. In the company of death, the prized possession of the Free State soon earned the name Red Rubber. Modern weaponry was provided to Leopold's militia only on specific terms. All cartridges were to be accounted for, and for every cartridge expended in execution, the victim's hand was to be provided as proof of execution. Soon enough, severed hands were provided to excuse labor shortages or to shorten one's period of forced labor. The demand for dissected hands then inspired a new black market, whereby villages would be raided by local officials for the harvesting of hands. Among the mercenaries of the Force Publique emerged a system of organ trading and cannibalism, cultivated in part by the Free State authorities to inspire terror and obedience. For the millions of Congolese, their homeland had turned into a living nightmare. Entire communities, drained of their most able-bodied workers, ceased to exist. Villages were abandoned, and a whole generation of children was left to starve. With no new generations to pass on the knowledge, the traditional systems of farming and trade that had existed for millennia across the Congo collapsed in a mere decade. Crop rotation was replaced with a network of rubber monocropping, which degraded the soil and resulted in widespread famine. With millions of refugees going about, diseases ranging from smallpox and sleeping sickness to syphilis and gonorrhea increased across the area. In some districts, dysentery and malnutrition alone would cause the deaths up to 60% of the population. The demographics of the Congo was so radically altered that Lingala, a language previously confined to the mouth of the Irubu River, emerged as a common tongue. Imagine, for instance, how drastically one must alter the demographics of France and Spain for Basque to appear as the primary language. That is essentially what happened to the African interior. Under the jackboots of the Free State, the pursuit of profit had cost the lives of between 10 and 20 million Congolese, with the consensus being 10 million. The region was mutilated beyond recognition. For the Free State, however, business was booming. Congolese rubber came to dominate a third of the worldwide rubber market. In 1888, during the early years of the Free State, profitability was recorded at 260,000 Belgian francs. By 1905, the wealth had ballooned to 47 million francs. With this newfound wealth, King Leopold, who came to be known as the Builder King, was able to provide for urban renewal throughout Belgium. Not everyone in Europe pretended not to notice the atrocities taking place in the Congo Free State, but attempts to bring public attention to them were met with a well-armed propaganda machine that slandered activists into public isolation or in some cases suicide. Nonetheless, in 1908, under domestic and foreign pressure, Leopold eventually conceded his private colonial hold to the Belgian parliament. The king then spent the last years of his life destroying any evidence of the abuses of the Free State. To a certain degree, it worked. For almost a century after his death, Leopold was remembered not for his brutality, but his great construction works. As for the Congo's rubber, it was eventually phased out when the compound was introduced to South and Southeast Asia. By then, the Congo became an area of irrelevance. So much so that when the country gained independence in 1960, only 30 Congolese had graduated from university nationwide. Moreover, since the Congo had been plundered so thoroughly and its people had lost an entire generation, knowledge of traditional farming and trade was lost. The Congolese had to import most of their basic necessities. As such, the newly independent Democratic Republic of the Congo was burdened with more debt than any other African country. The lack of organization, whether in education, agriculture, or public institutions, as well as the high sum of debt, sealed the fate of the country. The years following independence were chaotic, with one secessionist war to the next. Eventually, in the 1990s, the country returned to its familiar pattern when warlords regained power amidst a series of regional conflicts. What was once red rubber became blood diamonds, and conflict minerals such as timber and cobalt. In a cruel twist of fate, the wealth of natural resources has never allowed the Congo to escape the horror of its nightmare. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. Special thanks to Alexander Purton for helping me with this report. If you want to gain access to some interesting perks like early access, PDF files, or simply support us, just visit patreon.com/CaspianReport. Thank you for watching, and Sahol.